for a family of four up to $14,700. Sylvain Charlebois, the lead author and Dalhousie University Profit, Food Distribution and Policy, says that, quote, the era of cheap food has ended. Prices have been going up since 2010, and the pandemic simply made things worse. Soaring food costs expected to contribute to rising food insecurity across the country. And also the restaurant industry, which will be looking at a higher bill and passing that along on menu prices. But with supply chain issues and climate change also damaging the size of certain crops this year, all of this leading to higher prices next year. In the City News Business Center, I'm Mike Uppel.
Now, how are grocery stores doing? The parent company of Sobeys is reporting a second quarter profit of $175.4 million. That's up about $14 million from a year ago. Empire says results were helped by a nearly 5% increase in sales, the acquisition of a supermarket chain, and also the expansion of Farm Boy, the online grocery service in our province, too, that is owned by Sobeys, and its Freshco banner in Western Canada, all gaining for that company. There has been a sharp rise in COVID cases in Ottawa recently, especially in the 5 to 11-year age group. Now, the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the city encouraging parents to have their child immunized. Dr. Vera Etches says COVID in younger children leads to spread in older adults and can lead to things like hospitalizations, even death. Etches says they do have a good supply of vaccine for children in that age group, encouraging those 50-plus eligible to register for their booster on Monday to do so. Etches does have some advice for any holiday gatherings you may go to.
I think about it as the 3 C's. It's the simplest thing. Avoid crowds. Avoid closed spaces where there's not a lot of ventilation, and avoid close contact. The number of people that are right with us without masks on, without distancing, we need to be careful with how many people that is still.
Now, the doctor believes now is the time to turn the COVID case count around by vaccination and following COVID protocols like mask wearing and social distancing. More from Dr. Etches expected today. She's holding a media briefing in the next hour. City News Time 9:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Varying amounts of sun and cloud, the high just -5. Tonight, periods of snow, especially through the overnight hours, 2 to 3 centimeters, the low -9. And then Friday, flurries in the morning, not as cold, the high +2. For today, the high -5.
And right now it is feeling colder in the wind. It's -10 degrees in Ottawa, -9 in Smiths Falls. And it's cold, but in other parts of the country, you could consider it a lot worse. Snowfall and winter storm warnings remain in effect for almost every part of Nova Scotia after an overnight storm shut down schools and prompted flight cancellations at Halifax International. Some parts of the province were getting up to 30 centimeters of snow. 40 centimeters and 80-kilometer-an-hour wind gusts are forecast across Cape Breton. Wind and winter storm warnings are up for almost all of Newfoundland as well, except for the west coast of the island. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Your opinion.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And we're off and running. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. No time to waste. Let me tell you what we have coming up on the program. Author, post-media columnist Randall Denley writes about City Hall for the Ottawa Citizen, writes about the Ford government for the Post. Randall is one of 2 authors that we're going to have on the program this morning. Randall is going to be signing books at the EY Center again today, where they're having the Signatures Christmas sale all week. I spoke with Randall this morning, and he said yesterday his best day ever for book sales, which is great to hear. His column in The Citizen this week was about the future of LeBreton Flats. You know, what could go there? And really, just how serious is the National Capital Commission about even wanting something of significance there, just given the timeline? Interested parties they have until February to submit their ideas. We want something big. You have about 2 months to come up with something big and submit something big to us. It's not a lot of time. Randall usually joins us on a weekly basis, and it's great to have him back this week. In Ontario politics this week, there's a lot going on. 6 months out from the election, and here we have the Ford government once again getting holy heck because it's the Ford government, so it's always getting holy heck about something or other. And the latest thing it's getting holy heck about is rapid tests. Where are the rapid tests? We need more rapid tests. We need free rapid tests. They should be more widely available as a tool to help us fight against COVID-19 and now the Omicron variant. So we're going to talk about that with our panelists, and we'll talk about Doug Ford's ongoing pitch to the working man, the working class. Probably going to be some more news on that front soon. They've done in the PC Party and Ford Nation, they've done a lot of heavy lifting, coming up with various policies in an attempt to woo the working class voter. They announced yesterday that they were extending the paid sick day program. The government has since passed its Working for Workers bill. That's the one with the language about non-compete clauses, recognition of foreign credentials, this right to disconnect. In addition to that, they raised the minimum wage. They're now going to raise the minimum wage. And gig workers, that's the latest thing. Gig workers. The labor minister, Monty McNaughton, says he wants to develop a portable benefits program. That's something that they're looking at for gig workers. So if you're a New Democrat or a liberal, how do you start attacking Doug Ford after he has spent months and months and months trying to portray himself as a worker's best friend? And my goodness, there are even some kind words for Ontario Premier Doug Ford in, of all places, this morning, the Toronto Star from Martin Reg Cohn. He's the top Queen's Park columnist at that newspaper and rarely says anything nice about anyone named Ford. But this morning, he predicts that Doug Ford is going to win this election 6 months from now, that Andrea Horwath is basically unelectable, and nobody knows who the heck Stephen Del Duca is. He's the Liberal leader, in case you didn't know. So it's Doug Ford, big advantage to Doug Ford. Very interesting read. And he also gives some of the credit to Ford's turnaround, his political turnaround, gives some of the credit to Chrystia Freeland, who is Doug Ford's BFF, of course, in the Trudeau government. And we may even talk about one of Doug Ford's adult daughters. Krista Ford Haynes is an anti-masker, anti-vaxxer all over social media. And the media hasn't really paid too much attention to her because there's kind of this unwritten rule in political journalism that the politicians are fair game, but family members are off limits most of the time, unless the family member is somehow compromised because of their political involvement or because they somehow compromise the politician. So now we have Krista Ford Haynes attending anti-vaxxer events where she's being billed as the Premier's daughter. Come to this event, meet the Premier's daughter. So Robin Urbach in the Globe and Mail, great columnist for the Globe and Mail, says this makes her fair game now. You can criticize her if you're in journalism now. It's a game changer. And does that become now a political liability for Premier Ford? Do you have the clip? Just a little bit of. This is Krista Ford Haynes, one of her social media videos, going after the system, the whole system, right? Let's hear it.
They are going to take it all.
They're going to take it all.
They are going to take it all. And we've allowed it. We can't blame the government. We have to blame ourselves for covering our
right? Yeah. They are going to take it all. Your freedom. They are going to take it all, she says as she's on the treadmill. So does she now become a political liability for Premier Ford ahead of the election? We're going to get into all of this and a little bit more with Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander during our panel discussion that we call Ontario Politics This Week. From the National Post, I said we have two authors on the program today. The second one is the great John Ivison, political columnist John Ivison. He will also be selling and signing his Robbie Burns book this week at the Signature Show. And we're going to talk about his book, and we're going to talk about Canadian politics, because you can't have John Ivison on the show and not talk Canadian politics. There's barely a week left to go before the House of Commons hits the pause button until the end of January of next year. How's that for a Christmas holiday, David? Imagine next week, and you leave here to say, Rob, I'll see you January 30th. Wouldn't that be cool?
It's a good model. We should emulate that, I think.
When you think about the House, what have they been doing, okay? Kudos on the banning the conversion therapy bill, okay? That you got that done in a week. What else have they gotten done? Really, okay? Really. Not much to show for it. Not much has been getting done in your parliament since the summer. And I think one of the questions I want to ask John Ivison this morning is, Jagmeet Singh seems safe, I think, as leader of the New Democrats. And I don't think Blanchette is going anywhere as leader of the Bloc Québécois. Looks like he's pretty safe, too. But the other two, I don't know. I think there are question marks there. I wonder, when it comes to Justin Trudeau or Aaron O'Toole, if either of them will be around come the next election. I think that's one of the questions I want to ask to the great John Ivison when he joins us in the final hour of our program. Going to talk about the city budget this morning, passed yesterday. Going to talk about it with two people who are very familiar with the entire process of navigating a city budget. Alex Cullen was a city councillor for a long time. He was also an MPP, but he was a city councillor for a lot longer than he was an MPP. Cullen's a lefty. He'll join us again. And Walter Robinson was chief of staff to Mayor O'Brien. Walter's not a lefty. He'll be back with us. We're going to look at the kind of the overall themes of the city budget. We'll dig into the police budget and the transit budget. And then I can't help but wonder, nobody really knows right now, is this the last budget for Jim Watson as mayor of Ottawa? You know, that's, to me, the next big question now. What's the mayor going to do? Will he or won't he run for re-election? Says he's going to let us know by the end of next year. The end of this year. So we're going to get into that during our municipal affairs panel coming right up. And during the talkback hour this morning, I may have to ask David to leave the room. Okay, we've been hammering away on vaccines. We're not going to talk about vaccines and Omicron this morning. Been hammering away on that for days on end. Instead, we're going to talk about housing affordability. Housing affordability. The price of homes. And Gen Z. And their chances of ever owning a home of their own. With a front yard, a backyard, a white picket fence. Do you want a white picket fence? Would you like a white picket fence to go with your front yard and your backyard?
More so than anything in the world. It's all I want.
David doesn't like this topic because he says it triggers him. It causes him anxiety.
I have home price anxiety.
So here's the question, okay? As we watch these housing prices go up and up and up and up and up, year after year after year after year, here's what I want to know. Especially if you're a Gen Xer like me, or even better, a baby boomer. Okay, a baby boomer. Here's my question for you this morning, okay? How much did you pay for your first house? Will you tell me that? How much did you pay for your first house? How old were you when you bought your first house? My dad was in his 20s when he bought his first house. What was the interest rate, if you can remember, when you bought that house? Again, I go back to my father, who's still complaining about the interest rate that he was paying when he bought his house in the late 70s. How much money were you making a year at the time? Because everything is relative. But if you're willing to share that, I'd also be curious to know what kind of work you were doing to make that kind of money. And do you think Gen Z, that's David's generation, do you think they're going to have the same shot at owning a home that you had? Home prices have almost doubled in a decade in Ottawa. Incomes are only up 30% during that same time frame. Housing and the next generation. That's our Talkback Hour topic this morning at 750-1310 after the 10 o'clock news on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying, and then I shut my business down for I think a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries. Started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting. And anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not. But more so now, because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff. And again, their situations and their circumstances change.
Is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcoming back to the Rob Snow Show here on City News, author and columnist Randall Denley. Welcome back, Randall.
Good morning, Rob.
And you were at the Signatures Christmas show this week. You'll be back there again today. What's that been like this week?
Oh, it was tremendous yesterday, Rob. There's lots of people. Great to see them out. New readers, return readers. I actually had the biggest sales day I've had at an event like that. So it was pretty gratifying. I'm there through Sunday, and it's good to see these kind of events back in the city again.
Yeah, it makes it all worthwhile when you can actually get out and meet the people who love your books, right? And not being able to do that. I mean, we were speaking with Ron Corbett a few days ago. We'll be speaking with John Iveson about his Robbie Burns book a little bit later, as a matter of fact. It's just it's been such a tremendous loss for local authors.
Yeah, it's been a challenging year for anybody who likes to sell their books directly, and even if you don't, bookstores have been closed a lot of the time. They haven't done author signings, that kind of thing. All that sort of book-selling infrastructure you'd normally rely on hasn't been in place, but it's nice to know that people are still reading, and they're reading enthusiastically. So it was an encouraging day.
Yeah. For people who want to buy your books, Randall, what's the best way to buy them? You have your own website, right?
I do, at randalldenley.com. You can order any of my books there. They're easy to do, and we deliver them. So that's kind of the go-to place for my books if you're not at the EY Center show, but I hope to see a lot more people there.
Yeah, and you're going to be there today, right?
Yep, I'll be there today, tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday.
Excellent. So let's talk about your column for this week for the Ottawa Citizen. And hey, stop me if you've heard this one before. The National Capital Commission is looking for ideas for LeBreton Flats. Wow, it's like the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and on we go all over again, Randall, with this. So
yeah, they don't think it is, but my take on this, Rob, is that they just got the whole thing backwards. I mean, they did it right. They had two major proposals, each one of which brought together all the stuff they wanted. There were major attractions in their proposals, commercial, residential, greening, all that stuff was there. So if you, say, were in charge of an attraction, you knew what you were buying into. Now, they have a so-called master plan now, but it's more like, okay, this kind of stuff goes here, that kind of stuff goes there. Who's going to build it? When are they going to build it? Well, to be determined. And the biggest point I think that the NCC has missed here is that LeBreton Flats was always a real estate development play, as presented in those other two proposals. So, okay, let me build all this stuff, and I'm going to get you some attractions. Because there's really pretty much nothing you could put down there that'll pay for itself. Somebody has to pay for it. The money has to come from somewhere. I mean, the funniest part is the NCC saying, hey, we're open to an NHL hockey rink, Hey, Gene Melnick's open to it too. Okay, who would pay for it? If he could write a check for it or was willing to write a check, they'd probably be building it now, and that proposal wouldn't have fallen apart. But maybe a museum, a gallery. All right, who would pay for that? Nobody's lined up to do that. Maybe an aquarium. I don't know, maybe, but when you say to people who are supposed to be proposing these things, well, tell us your big ideas and, how it would all work. Give us some pictures, give us the financials, do all that stuff. And you got to have it in by the end of February at noon. Because, like 1 o'clock, it'd be too late. It's just, I think people who might be interested, if there are any such people, just look at that and go, what?
Right, yeah.
It's not really how it works. There's so much work went into those other proposals to come up with something that was actually financially sound. And now, to me, it's just all backwards. Well, let's just start building stuff down there. And, what would those big ideas be? The whole question for any, so-called big idea is, who's going to pay for it?
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge. And I think, the simplest thing down there would be to take that, I think it's a 6.5 hectare site, and say, we're going to make that into a great urban park. Because we don't have one downtown. So let's just do that. It's the easiest thing to do. But then, of course, you immediately go to, that's a good idea. Who'd pay for that? And a lot of that was being paid for through the development. I don't see the NCC paying for it. The city hasn't shown any willingness to do anything down there. So whatever happens, that's the question. Who's going to pay for it? And I think all the ideas they're floating out, say, well, people mention these things. They'd like to see them. I'm sure they would, but where's the money come from? And it doesn't seem to be any real flow of money to support anything with the NCC style of development.
Yeah, I'll never forget when Bruce Firestone said to me, the NCC I call it the No Commitment Club. He said the No Commitment Club. So
yeah, it's a little worrisome too, Rob. I think they say, well, don't worry if we don't get big ideas. We've got backup plan. More mixed-use development. Some offices, some condos, whatever. The same stuff that'll be on most of the site now.
Yeah.
Now they assured me when I spoke to the lead planner on this that no, we're not in a rush to get there. We want something big on the site. Isn't it probably sincere in that? But I think the way they're going about it is backwards, really. And who's going to pay for it? I don't see them having come to grips with that. Because really, all the kind of things that they want down there, they're not money-making attractions. So that's one of the reasons why we don't have them in Ottawa now. So it's a problem, and it's one I'd like to see the city of Ottawa get engaged with too, because they act like, LeBreton Flats, nothing to do with us, It's just the biggest piece in the center of our city, but of course that's a federal government thing, so don't look at, we put the library there, the library. And the NCC says, well, we've got the library going in. Like, okay, but is that going to make me want to move to LeBreton Flats? And how often am I going to go to the library? It's not, it's a nice thing to have, but it's not a neighborhood-defining thing on a site that size. The other thing, I think, rather than really talking about is, so what does the pandemic mean to downtown development overall? I would say a big part of the pitch of the previous plans was, hey, all these things we're going to pop up, they're right downtown. All kinds of people are downtown. They work there. They want to live there, walk to work, all great. Now that's all in jeopardy, as we've discussed previously. And I don't think they're really taking into account the fact that has changed. What is my reason to live downtown now? If it isn't work, what is it? And if it's going to be LeBreton, it has to be something pretty attractive, I think, to make people say, yeah, that's where I'm going to choose. Because it's not going to be cheap there.
Look, thanks again for this morning. I hope you sell a lot of books today. If you want to.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to. It's certainly great to meet the readers. It's helpful as a writer to know who you're writing for.
Yes, great stuff. If you want to buy one of Randall's books, he's at the EY Center today through Sunday at the Signatures Christmas Show. And we'll speak again next week, Randall. Thank you.
Okay, Rob. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
The Rob Snow Show, brought to you by Myers Auto.
Now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 9 degrees. It's minus 8 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. If you think food prices have been a shock, especially in the last half of this year, a bigger one is coming next. A new study from Dalhousie University says the average family of 4 will pay $14,000 next year for their food. That's about $1,000 more than you spent this year. Waiting for the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the city to address the media today, scheduled for the next half hour. That's after Dr. Vera Etches said yesterday she is concerned about a rising COVID case count in the city, especially in those ages 5 to 11. Now, how long will we be battling COVID? One infectious disease expert says vaccines are important, but it's going to take strong political leadership and policies to bring COVID-19 under control. Dr. Isaac Bogosh is guessing the virus is not going away for a long time. Scientists and researchers studying other respiratory viral pandemics for an estimate on just how long COVID-19 could stick around. Bogosh believes it will start to settle down in 2 to 4 years. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News. 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
It's time for Ontario Politics This Week with Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you. And Andrew Brander, which it says on my prep sheet here, it says senior consultant with Crestview Strategy. But I don't believe that that's accurate anymore because I saw on Twitter that Andrew was promoted at Crestview.
Little job bump this week.
Very good, Andrew. Congratulations. Vice President, right? Vice President? Is that right?
That's right.
Look, congratulations on that, Andrew. That's
Exciting.
I'm sure that's well deserved. Andrew's a former advisor to the Ford government as well, and they both join me every week, and we boot around what's been happening at Queen's Park, where the workers working for Ontario, unless they're disconnected, Act has now become the law of the land. This is the one that includes the language about non-compete clauses, aims to provide easier recognition of foreign credentials, includes that right to disconnect. As well, though, the government announced yesterday it's extending its paid sick day program until the summertime of next year. And there are reports that the labor minister, Mr. McNaughton, may introduce some kind of benefits plan that it's a portable benefits plan. It would be a portable benefits plan tied to workers and not employers. And this is something that's been aimed at gig workers, which Mr. McNaughton told me the last time I interviewed him is something that he thinks is very worthwhile in pursuing. So the narrative is 6 months out from the election, Doug Ford is your best friend. He's a worker's best friend. Lindsay, what's behind this strategy?
Well, it was definitely a turn of style from what we first all learned about Doug Ford after the 2018 election, having come in with a firm stick against unions, cutting the minimum wage, and doing the first rounds of business of government to really take a stick to people who are working hard and were in the lower income brackets in our workforce in Ontario. And, like everyone through the pandemic, saw a bit of change that needed to happen. I still think one of the biggest things was actually the switch of putting Minister McNaughton into Labour and telling him that, change of plans. We need to actually befriend these unions because we have an infrastructure plan and we're not doing it. We can't do it without them. And had a real change of tone to want to work with workers, but also seeing that we were going to work, everyone was going to work in a different way because of the pandemic. And you either move forward with that or you get left behind. And those workers will leave a government behind that doesn't reflect what they're doing. Now, it's a little bit harsh because, of course, the celebration for a minimum wage that should have happened in 2018 and things that were taken away and cut to now be celebrated is a bit tough as a Liberal, but at the same time, I will congratulate people for finding the right path forward on these issues that we need more than ever. It's not a political thing. We're through a pandemic. We actually need government to be moving in this direction, but it does position him well. It's just about whether people remember that this is a turn, not in his original nature, and people do have a long memory to what the first 2 years was like.
All right. Andrew, what do you think is behind this strategy? Doug Ford, the worker's best friend.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd agree with Lindsay and in everything actually that she said. It's certainly a turning point for the government, but I think it was purposefully communicated as such. Remember, the government came in with a very different mandate prior to COVID in terms of finding efficiencies, and clearly priorities changed. I think all governments across Canada are trying to keep pace with this new economy that Lindsay referred to. And that's not something that any conservative government, especially this one, can ignore or take a particularly dogmatic approach to. So I think what we've seen in their announcements around shoring up some of those tried and true jobs in domestic manufacturing, Ontario as a rich, trained workforce who have come to value those well-paying union jobs. But at the same time, the nature of work is changing, and this has been aided by COVID in a few ways. There's kind of two sides of the coin on this one. First of all, we've seen this gig economy take off, the importance of delivery, app-based services, and sort of this working from home mentality for the better part of the last 2 years. So many people are choosing to value convenience and their time more. And you're seeing a recognition of that with Ontario becoming the first province to require these right to disconnect laws. But at the same time, with inflation as high as it is, many people are choosing to switch to these jobs because they can work longer hours. They can work and make more than they can in a warehouse. Or they can, take these kinds of jobs up on evenings and weekends, and that is it's a bigger problem because they're really just looking to make up the gaps that they're coming up with in their cash flow. So this is about acknowledging that shift, and I actually expect that this really, the change in tone is going to continue. I think we're probably going to see a Working for Workers 2.0 that sort of ties into the budget coming up in the winter, and I think that's going to be a central plank for the PCs on their re-election platform.
Okay, very interesting. So with 6 months to go, and with Premier Ford's team taking what may have been, say, a shield issue and trying to turn it into a sword issue, we're the workers' best friend, how do you make sure that the Ford team doesn't get to use that sword? They have to use their shield instead. If you're the New Democrats and the Liberals, how do you go about poking holes in this strategy, Lindsay?
Well, it's not a natural spot for them, and it's also it isn't just that this is quite a recent change, right?
Right. So welcome to the party. Like, where have you been, kind of?
Yes, and blowing up labor legislation, trying to water down credentials, to blow up the skilled trades, to putting more workers at risk with less training, not for 18 months into this pandemic without a 6-day plan, rolling back the labor legislation from previous governments that would have been so critical to workers through the first 18 months of the pandemic. So there is quite a track record there, as well as a connection to all of the people who did major attack on labor legislation that were in the Harper government, who now also reside at Queen's Park. So there's a lot to work with there, and the other two parties have a track record. One believes that they are even though I don't believe they are the party of the worker anymore with the NDP, but also an amazing track record under the provincial Liberals that brought forward a fantastic legislation that had increased the minimum wage, are proposing a study about the 4-day work week, that are really about where the ball's going, and it's more in their wheelhouse. So it'll be a question about credibility and track record.
Okay. I'm sure the New Democrats and Liberals are waiting for your advice, Andrew.
Well, I mean, on the issue of credibility and track record, the Liberals made a lot of promises when they were in office that were tied to post-election promises. This is a government that's actually, taken these steps before an election. So I mean, I'd agree with Lindsay, but I do think that this party is not only just making those commitments, but proving those commitments through actions. And so I think voters will have a clear track record to judge both the Liberals on and the Conservatives in the next election. And I think all of these commitments being shored up in actual legislation that's passed before an election campaign is really boxing the Liberals and the NDP in on issues around labor and workers' rights.
Okay, that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. Sure, Andrew, go ahead.
I would just add one more thing, because Lindsay brought up Minister McNaughton, and I would say there are few ministers also in this government that are doing as much to position themselves for sort of a future run at the leadership.
I've heard that.
Than Minister McNaughton, and I think he obviously has those ambitions. He's run for the leadership in the past.
Yep.
He's been out front and center on these announcements, and they're probably not all that popular with the businesses or employers who are going to be having to foot the bill for these. But he's really leaning into this strategy, so it'll be interesting to watch what he does over the next few years.
Okay, look, we're going to stop a little bit early, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about Krista Ford Haynes. Is she now fair game for criticism in the media? One columnist thinks so. And kind words for Premier Ford in the Toronto Star. I mean, it's cold outside, but is heck frozen over? This is Ontario Politics This Week on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the center. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box as well as the Marketmobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years and Marketmobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Back with Ontario politics this week. Part 2 with Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander. Always been a fan of Robin Urbach, columnist, now with the Globe and Mail, used to be with the National Post, and she argues that Premier Doug Ford's adult daughter, Krista Ford Haynes, is now fair game for criticism in the media. Family members are pretty much off limits unless what they do is overtly political or compromises a politician in some way. But Robin writes, quote, she appeared at the Christian Fight for Freedom alongside her husband, Dave Haynes, put on unpaid leave from his job with the Toronto Police Service for failing to comply with the police force's vaccine mandate. The $5 a head event, which included several participants who spoke out against vaccine and mask mandates, advertised special guests, Dave and Krista Haynes, the family of Premier Doug Ford, as well as former Ford ally Charles McVety, who joked on stage about Miss Haynes running for premier. The draw for the event was not a special appearance by a random Instagrammer, but by someone with a literal seat at Mr. Ford's dinner table. That rendered Ms. Haynes' anti-vaccine advocacy a matter of public interest. A relative invoking her connection to the premier to sell tickets to an anti-vaccine event can no longer maintain an expectation of privacy. Lindsay, what do you think of that? Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, and I even go a little bit further, which is I think that because she has been an active person on social media with a message to an audience, trying to get that message out, followers. So do we actually think, random Instagrammers, she is trying to be an influencer online in this topic, have a voice, have an audience, which doing that in a public sphere of social media will even open you up to that, especially because she is now headlining, whether they use the premier's name or connection to the premier or not. She has become somebody who is becoming high profile in the anti-vax community. And
shouldn't have ignored her before. You're saying you shouldn't have been ignored.
Yeah, it was her agenda before, and it's been her agenda online and social media, and trying to promote that into broad audiences. So I do think if you choose to make something public, you have become in the world of social media, you have you opened yourself up to public criticism. Even before, obviously, this awful connection of people selling tickets in connection to her potential influence with government. That will be something the Integrity Commissioner probably needs to look at, and probably
the what commissioner? Sorry, Lindsay. What
the Integrity Commissioner.
Oh, the Integrity Commissioner. Okay.
Because there is something about using ministerial and family, using those sort of titles for fundraising events and those implications. So, but, much like many awkward conversations families are having about who gets invited and who doesn't because of vaccination status, this is going to continue to be a problem for Doug Ford because he's going to be trying to deliver that he has done the right thing for Ontario and that we all need to get vaccinated. And his daughter's profile is increasing on this file. So it is really, it is a big problem for him and probably going to be some very awkward conversations around.
No cheesecake for you, Krista. No cheesecake for you. Okay. All right. All right, we're going to play a little bit of, she's on a treadmill in a fitness center, and she is saying, government is going to take away all your freedom. David's got the tape here. Roll the tape.
They are going to take it all.
They're taking it all.
They are going to take it all. And we've allowed it. We can't blame the government. We have to blame ourselves for covering our faces. Something bigger is going on in the background, but I'm not going to start talking about it because I was called crazy last year. I'm going to be called crazy again. I'm just going to ask everyone to collectively wake up.
Wake up.
It's not going to be 2 doses and done. It's going to be boosters for life. That's it. Just stop complying. Please and thank you.
Stop complying, she says. Stop complying. Stop complying. Although it sounds like, it's going to be a booster anyway. It's not going to be 2 shots and done. But nevertheless, is she fair game now, in your opinion? Has she opened herself up to more media scrutiny now, Andrew? What do you think?
Yeah, yes. She is fair game. I'm always of the opinion, obviously, that the family should in large part be off limits, but that's always come with the understanding that the family has wanted their privacy. And this is obviously not the case. And I do feel it needs to be said because we're often conflating those who have taken issue with some of the mandates and some of the inconsistent rules as being sort of anti-vaxxers. This, to be clear, is not that. So let's call it what it is. And I think I think she's opened herself up for criticism. She's clearly let the organizers of this event leverage those relationships into
fundraising, like a fundraising.
Well, at least into her platform. So she's certainly not making a secret in terms of who she's related to. I would question Lindsay's comment around sort of the integrity commissioner and sort of questions of influence. I frankly think I'd be surprised to find anyone that looks at Ford's record on the measures he's brought in throughout the course of the pandemic and says, oh yeah, clearly she's had a huge amount of influence over this government's policy because the direction of his government is completely in the opposite direction. She sounds like one of his biggest critics.
Yeah.
So I mean, when it comes to the question of whether this is going to be sort of a liability to the premier, as you just said, I don't think there's many people who sit around their family table at Christmas and agree with everyone else's political views. That certainly doesn't happen at my table, but we all still share cheesecake. So we try to get along.
All right.
But yeah, I think the Premier has his own brand on this, and I think it's clear it's not in line with where Krista is on this issue.
All right, let's talk about this. Just because Martin Regicon has so very few good things to ever say about the Ford government. I mean, it's like the Toronto Star and anything with the Fords. It's like arch enemies, right? This is the column this morning in which he predicts that Doug Ford's going to win re-election 6 months from now, that Andrea Horwath is unelectable, and Stephen Del Duca just doesn't have any recognition right now. Not been on the job long enough. But Ford has also grown into the role, turned things around. This is what is in the column this morning. Quote, "The outsider became an insider. More at ease with the public service he once mistrusted, more comfortable in his own skin. By the time of the pandemic, all the pieces had fallen into place. Ford's foibles are still there, but instead of disruption, there is discipline. In place of reflexive outbursts, there is more reflection. In lieu of Tory ideology, there is a populism more in tune with policy. Ford's constant partner and interlocutor in the pandemic has been Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, negotiating on sick days and federal payouts. In recent days, he's been dealing with her directly on a federal-provincial deal for child care subsidies that would have been anathema to him in the past. Whereas today, the bargain is primarily fiscal, not ideological. The Premier is also making peace with elements of organized labor, listening to the very unions he once froze out." So, what do you think? And firing Dean French, he says, was the key to the whole turnaround, getting rid of that guy. What do you think of that analysis, Lindsay?
Well, there is definitely the departure of Dean French did do a big scene change, as well as some people that had been very ingrained in the Harper government that brought their ideologies to a populist vision that Doug Ford put out in the 2018 campaign. It's a fair comment in the sense that obviously where the polling numbers are at, we're 5 months and 25 days out. There's a lot of, Stephen Del Duca has a lot of work to do with the number of seats that need to be turned. So of course people are going to write that there's an opportunity for Doug Ford, especially when heading into this phase of the pandemic and future threats. If people feel that we need a bit of a stay of the course government, as they did with this past federal election, there is a chance for re-election, and particularly because, look, I will say this: 2011, when I was in McGuinty's office at the time, Premier McGuinty's re-election came on the time of after the
fiscal,
economic crisis.
the economic crisis.
Yeah.
And that's when Harper won his majority too. So
and it was a bit of a let's stay the course.
Yeah.
And also the fact that people love to give people a second chance because they want to be given a second chance.
Oh, good
so
point.
we are quite empathetic voters sometimes if there isn't any kind of major offense or a major movement behind somebody.
Whoa.
But we also have to remember that this election cycle can move a lot faster. Things are ever shifting with the pandemic. When you think about the fact that Doug Ford was only leader for 6 weeks before the election last time, we wouldn't have even been talking about Doug Ford.
Yeah, I know. 6 months. Yeah, we're just tight on time, so I want to hear. You get the last word this week, Andrew. Go ahead.
Well, thanks. I feel somewhat attacked by Lindsay's comments on former Harper staffers turned Ford government staffers, but I would say, look, there's nothing the Toronto Star quite enjoys more than setting massive expectations. Just have the Tories find a way of spoiling those somehow. So I do question
snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
That's right. I question the motives a bit around this piece.
Okay.
But I agree very briefly with what Lindsay's saying. There's a long way to go before June. But what I would say is that COVID gave this government purpose, more than it being a departure of Dean French. It gave this government something that they didn't have after the first year when I had left the government, and that's a record that is getting stronger every day, that they're able to make significant, tangible announcements.
All right. 1,290 cases. That number just came out for Ontario today. Whoa, 1,290. Okay, folks, that's our time. We'll speak next week. All the best. Stay well.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Ontario Politics this week with Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander. Talk Back Hour, talking housing affordability. How much did you pay for your first house, Gen Xer or Baby Boomer? Right after the news, City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -9 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's -8. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. If you thought food was expensive this year, 2022 is going to be a lot worse.
Food prices in this country are expected to rise to record highs next year. Canada's food price report predicts the average family of four will pay close to $1,000 more for food in 2022 for a total annual grocery bill of nearly $15,000. That's a 7% rise compared to this year, the biggest jump ever predicted. The study's lead author says the era of cheap food has ended, adding the pandemic has accelerated the price increase. Where your wallet will be hit the hardest will be in the dairy aisle and on restaurant menus, both expected to see price increases of 6 to 8%. The report blames supply chain disruptions, labor market issues, and adverse weather events as some of the key drivers pushing up food prices. Laura Carney, City News.
City News time at 10:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Varying amounts of sun and cloud, the high just -5. Tonight, periods of snow, especially through the overnight hours, 2 to 3 centimeters, the low -9. And then Friday, flurries in the morning, not as cold, the high +2. For today, the high -5.
And right now in Ottawa, -9. It's -8 degrees in Smiths Falls. The province is seeing 3.5% positive rate from its latest COVID testing numbers. From over 40,200 tests that were done, there are 1,290 more cases of COVID in Ontario today. That's along with 10 more deaths. Now, 36 of the new cases are in Ottawa, 20 more in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 19 in Eastern Ontario, 14 new cases in Renfrew County. Now, the Chief Medical Officer of Health is concerned about the level of COVID in the region. Dr. Vera Etches says in Ottawa, it's mainly due to a growing COVID case count in one age group.
The rapid rise that we're seeing this week in the numbers of people between the ages of 5 and 11 who are testing positive for COVID, we have seen from experience that this rise leads to rises in other age groups and can result in hospitalizations and unfortunately death.
Now, Dr. Etches says with the holiday gathering season going on, to limit your indoor activities with anyone who is not immunized. Etches also says they have a lot of capacity for 5 to 11-year-olds to get their shot and encourages anyone 50 and older who qualifies for a booster shot. You can register starting Monday to get that. Dr. Etches is providing a further update this hour. Stay with City News for more on this story. The World Health Organization is worried rich countries are a little bit spooked by the Omicron variant and they could start hoarding their vaccines. The expert panel on vaccination is urging governments to stop a widespread use of boosters so they can send doses to low-income countries where people still have not had their first shots. There are also concerns south of the border. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control says more than 40 people in the states now infected with Omicron. Whit Johnson telling us this morning that health officials are also watching as the Delta variant continues to drive up infections and hospitalizations there.
The Omicron variant now detected in at least 22 states. This as another winter surge fueled by the Delta variant begins to take hold. At least 31 states and D.C. seeing an increase in hospital admissions. The U.S. now reporting more than 117,000 cases each day, a jump of nearly 83% since late October.
Now, the U.S. did reach a milestone with roughly 200 million fully vaccinated people as of yesterday. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Real estate in the next generation. That's our focus for the Talk Back Hour with your help at 750-1310. Here's what I want to know. As we watch these housing prices go in one direction, up, 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 year after year after year, here's what I want to know. How much did you pay for your first house? Will you tell me that? Will you tell me that? Will you admit it on the radio? If you're, say, a Gen Xer like me, or even better, a baby boomer, the generation ahead of me, how much did you pay for your first house? How much did you pay for your first house? How old were you when you bought your first house? I'd be curious to know that. What was the interest rate, if you can remember, when you bought that house? I bet you it was higher than the interest rates we have today. What were you making at the time when you bought your first house? Do you remember that? Are you willing to share that with me this morning at 750-1310? And do you think the next generation, Gen Z, that's my producer, David, that's his generation. Do you think they're going to have the same shot at owning a home that you had or that your parents had? Yeah, I thought we'd do something a little bit different this morning here on the Rob Snow Show Talk Back Hour, but I need you to take part. Okay, at 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. We've been going pretty hardcore on COVID-19 for the last week or so around here. On Omicron, on vaccines, on booster shots, on, the unvaccinated and the vaccinated, everything else related to COVID-19. So I need a change of pace. I need a change of pace, probably more than you need a change of pace. So I really hope you'll join the discussion this morning. I want to talk about buying a house. I want to talk about housing affordability. I want to talk about the next generation. I want to talk about their prospects, of ever owning a house. We have some new public opinion research on that front, which sort of prompted me to go with this as a topic this morning. More on that in a moment. I want to compare what it's like trying to get into the housing market now compared to when you were trying to scrape together enough money to put a down payment on a home of your own. Okay. David, do you have okay, just put the caller on hold. We'll get to the caller in just a second. So David didn't want me to do this hour. He says it triggers him. It triggers him. It makes him depressed.
It does.
Okay, makes him depressed. Okay.
It's tough for me.
How old are you now, David? 23, right?
24.
Oh, 24. Okay, 24. Missed your birthday. Sorry about that. David, I told David we're going to do this topic this morning, David. And he said, I'm going to email my grandfather, ask him how much he paid for his first house in Shawville.
Pontiac.
Shawville in the Pontiac.
Yeah.
And he got back to you, right?
Did.
What's your grandfather's first name?
It's Versal.
Versal. Okay. And how much did Versal pay for his first house?
It was 1962.
1962.
It cost $6,500.
$6,500. Holy cow.
He took out a loan for $5,000.
So he put $1,500 down, took down a loan for $5,000.
It was $1,000 a year to repay it with an interest rate of 7%.
An interest rate of 7%.
Yeah, and he still lives there. The house today
He
is
still lives in the same house?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, really?
The house my parents or my dad grew up at. Today it's worth $140,000. Dufferin Street in Shawville.
Dufferin Street in Shawville.
Yep.
$6,500. 1962. Be curious to know how much money he was making a year at the time, because everything is relative. I get that. Everything is relative. But there you go. $6,500. My God. I don't know if I'd buy a $6,500 car these days. Be like a winter beater of a car, a $6,500 car. So look, whoa, lots of people have called. That's great. Gord in Ottawa. You're on City News. Gord, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm good. Gord, how are you?
You have a great show, and I really enjoy listening to you as often as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Gord. It's so very kind of you to say. Are you a baby boomer, Gen Xer? Do you know?
Yeah, no, I know. Well, I think I'm sure I know.
Okay.
I'm a baby boomer.
All right.
I did not buy my first house until I was 39 years old.
Oh, okay.
I was in the Army. I was in Germany from 1982 to 86.
Okay.
I bought our house when we were posted back to Ottawa. It cost $186,500.
$186.
And the interest rate was 11.5%.
Ooh, 11.5%. Where'd you buy the house, Gord? Where'd you buy the house in Ottawa, if you don't mind me asking?
In Hunt Club.
In Hunt Club, okay. What kind of house?
Single, 2-story, 4-bedroom, standard lot.
Okay.
That I see what young people today do not want. When I see the houses that are being built out in Orleans, Riverside, South, close together, no backyards, no front yards, and when I talk to the Gen Z people, they're not interested in lawns and pools and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I think the real difference, though, is that my wife and I believe that the most important thing was to save money to buy a house.
Right. Okay.
So,
okay.
And then after we bought the house, the most important thing was to save money and pay off the mortgage.
Right.
So we never had 2 cars, 3 computers, 3 TVs, winter holidays in the Caribbean.
Okay.
We went out one night a week to a restaurant, and that was Friday nights after we finished work.
Holy cow.
And the aim was to pay off the mortgage. I don't see that today.
Oh, real Protestant work ethic there, Gord.
Well, I don't see that today in the Gen Z. The Gen Z, they want everything. They want the big TVs, and they want this, and this. And then they go on the radios on Saturday morning and complain to the real estate show that interest rates are 2.5% or 3% or 2%, and my God, how can I afford to buy a house? Well, just make a decision. You know, it's pretty easy. Just make a decision.
Yeah, but Gord, is it, Gord, now a house, like that house that you bought in Hunt, do you still live in that house? Or
Still live in this house.
Like if you put the for sale sign up on the front lawn now, Gord, what would you try and sell it for, do you figure?
Probably $700,000, $800,000.
$700,000 or $800,000. So poor David there. How's he ever going to buy the same house that you were able to buy in your 30s, you know?
Well,
if it's $700,000 or $800,000, like, you know?
Well, I'm talking about the city of Ottawa. There are people in this city in Ottawa who are collectively, as a couple, making well over $200,000 a year.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because this is a fat cat city. I understand there are certainly issues, and I watched a news clip last night where young Gen Zs in Toronto said, "I'll be lucky if I can afford to buy a condo, and I don't want a big house anyway." But I think everyone's got to have a cutoff here. You got to decide how you want to live your life and what's the most important thing.
Okay. When you bought that house, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but when you bought that house for whatever, what was it, 186 or something like that, you said, around there?
Yep, 186.5.
How much were you making at the time, do you figure?
Well, I went downstairs to check on my income tax
really?
to
Okay.
see what I was making, as I knew you were going to ask that question, and it doesn't go back to 1986 in my files. But so I was sitting there thinking about it, and I think it was in the 40s. I was in the 40s.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Look, Gord, thank you so much. You've got us off to a great start.
Have a great day. Enjoy
talk
your
soon.
show.
Yeah, I appreciate that once more. There you go. Okay, that's how it works. Very easy. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll take as many calls as we can. 750-1310. So there's a boomer, paid $186, although he bought late because he was in the Army, he said. Late 80s. $186 at Hunt Club. He said if he put the for sale sign on it now, somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 for that house. Rob Snow Show, City News.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Right, calling the Gen Xers, the boomers. How much did you pay for your first house? Okay. How much did you pay for your first house? How old were you when you bought your first house? Interest rate, if you remember. What was the interest rate on the house? How much money were you making at the time, if you're willing to share that? And do you think Gen Z, David's generation, do you think they're going to have the same shot at owning a home? The Gen Z is basically under 25 years old now. That's Gen Z. Do you think they're going to have the same shot when the average sale price of a home in Ottawa is like $720 now? $720? Jeff in Carp. Jeff, good morning.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm very well. Beautiful sunshiny day.
Yeah, it's nice out there today. Yes, it is. Could be a little warmer, but that's on the way apparently. So it's taking its time getting here. So
we're in Canada.
Jeff, how much did you pay for your first house?
Well, we actually built. I live in Athens. I reside there.
Okay.
We built the house 25 years ago, just off the family farm. So I mean, minus the lot. When it was all said and done, we have $179,000 into it.
$179,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
2x4 was $1.19.
Okay. What's a 2x4 now? I don't know.
Yeah, they're up around $30 some.
Okay.
Now that's a 2x4 by 16 if I got the figures right.
Right.
So I mean that's considerable increase. Now back in the summer of 2020, right out of the blue, I was offered $400,000 for the house. I told the wife, I said, let's get the for sale sign, let's put it up, let's sign the papers. And she was right. She says, we have nowhere to go after that. We sell the house for $400,000 plus.
What are you going to buy? What are you going to buy,
house.
right? Yeah.
We got to buy another house, which would be about $600,000.
Right.
So what are we? Are we really any further ahead? So we live on a 1 acre lot. We got great neighbors, just one neighbor beside me, and, wide open space. I live on paved road, no street lights, no sidewalks, rural country zone. My taxes, they're pretty good for where we are. That being said, it's I can't afford to move.
Can't afford to move. Yeah, if you sold your house, you'd as your wife said, you have nowhere to go, right? What would you buy? Okay, so you made a few $100,000, but what are you going to do with it? I guess, right? So yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm 53, so that puts me in Gen X, right?
Yep.
So that being said,
do you have sympathy? Do you have sympathy for the younger generation?
Yes, I do.
And what they're up against with home prices.
Here's a scenario. My daughter, she just graduated. She's got a job in dental hygiene. Knock on wood. Not many kids get a job in their field.
Right.
She's making good money. She bought a house quite a bit smaller than mine in Gananoque. She paid well over $400,000.
In Gananoque?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they paid over $400,000 for it. That being said, the house is needs a lot of updates. It's
like a fixer-upper in Gananoque for $400,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that being said, the house is still back in the 70s. Paneling,
right,
on
sure.
the walls, that sort of stuff.
Wow.
Now, real estate is never gonna go down. It's always going to go up.
Yeah.
My father and his brother, they sold property on the water. They actually traded it for a combine about 75 years ago. So
I don't know if they got the best of that trade, but
no. But they got the grain off.
Right. Okay. All right, Jeff. Look, great stuff. Great to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Right.
Yep. Bye-bye. Yep. In Nepean, a wonderful place to be. And John is on City News. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. Great show. Always tune it in when I drive through.
Well, I love it, John. How much did you pay for your first house, John?
I was in 1979. I lived in Oshawa.
Okay.
I was paid $50,000 for a 1,200 square foot bungalow on a third of an acre property in the city of Oshawa, and I was working at the Motors at the time, making $6.88 an hour.
$6.88 an hour. Wow. And you bought a $50,000 house. Holy smokes.
Yeah. And then 2 years after that, well, I guess 1982, interest rates went to 19%.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate I was locked in for the 5-year term, so I didn't see an increase until 5 years. I guess my next interest rate was like $12 or 12%.
Yeah.
But I live now in Nepean there. I'm just renting. I had 3 homes in Peterborough there where I was soon quickly between renters from heck and being taxed to death. I end up selling it all and tried to retire. But I'm now renting in the PN, and the wife and I are looking at our bank account, and it's like we're not having to pay property tax, so that money's in our pocket, and we now actually have more disposable income. But I can't see our young lads. Like, I got 2 young lads there, and it's I doubt they'll ever.
You don't think they'll ever be able to buy a house? You don't think they'll ever be able to buy a house? Yeah. How old are they? How old are they, John, if you don't mind me asking?
One's 25 and the other one's 13.
Okay. All right. And the 25-year-old, is he working or?
Yeah, he works downtown Ottawa there. That's why we moved to Ottawa. We wanted to change of pace, and Ottawa seemed to have a lot to offer. So
Right.
we had actually retired in Spain, and then COVID hit.
Right. So in 79, when you bought that house in Oshawa, how old were you at the time? Did you tell me that already? You may have told me.
19.
19 years old. Wow. Holy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I told you, I was working at General Motors for a couple of years now, and it was like, I thought, what a great opportunity.
Right.
And
You're set.
You're set. I didn't want to pay rent in an apartment anymore.
Wow.
So,
what a crazy time. Times have changed, John. Thank you, John. All the best. Let's take this one. Kate in Ottawa. Kate, good morning. You're on City News.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Kate.
The first house I bought, I was 21 years old.
21? Wow.
Yep.
Oh.
I started working when I was 14 years old, and my parents taught me the importance of saving, and I'm pushing that on to my son. He has a goal of earning a Tesla by the time he's 16, and he's well on his way to doing that.
Wow.
I've owned 5 houses. I'm 45 years old now.
Okay, so the first house you bought.
Yeah, it was 21.
How much was it? How much was it?
$120,000.
Okay, hold on, Kate, hold on. Yeah, okay, sorry, that's what I wanted to ask you. What kind of house?
Yeah.
Yep.
It was a townhome, and it was a condo townhome. I will never buy a condo again. My dad bought.
Was it in Ottawa, Kate? Here in Ottawa? Yeah. Whereabouts in Ottawa, if you don't mind me asking?
It was Hetherington area.
Oh, the Hetherington area.
So they had rebuilt those. They were rental unit townhouses, and they took them over and turned them into condos.
Right. Okay.
So my dad bought a single-family home 30 years ago in Orleans for $120,000. He unfortunately passed away 5 years ago, and I got it appraised 5 years ago at $300,000. Now that I'm currently in the process of renovating that house and turning the basement into an income property, and when I got it appraised before the renovations, it's at $495 now, and after the renovations, it's expected to be over $800,000.
And your father bought it for $120,000
30 years ago.
30 years ago. Wow. Holy smokes. All right, Kate. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Good stuff. I don't, in Hetherington, even in Hetherington, you're not going to get a townhouse for $100,000 anymore, right? Not a chance. 750-1310. This will be the last one before halftime. Derek, Ottawa. Derek, good morning, Derek.
Hey, good morning, Rob.
Hi, Derek. How much you pay for your first house?
I bought my first home in 2000. It's in Barrhaven. It was a fairly new Minto build.
Okay.
I paid $176.
What kind of house?
It was a single home, 1,700 square foot on a corner lot.
Oh, wow.
Single car garage. And it's my first home, 7.6% interest. And
7.6%.
The previous owners bought it, I think it was about 2 years previous, not getting ripped off. It was a family friend. They were going through divorce, so I did a private deal, and they had paid about $140 something. So I thought after 2 years that they were, just out to make money. But so settled at $176, and
you still live there, Derek? Or?
No, I sold it in 2004.
Okay.
$258.
For $258. Wow.
$258. I thought I made off like a bandit.
Yeah. What do you think that house would be worth now if you?
It's on Vista Point. I believe it's probably about 700 and something.
Wow, holy.
Yeah, probably around there.
Crazy.
So
yeah. How old were you when you bought that house?
26.
26. Wow, holy smokes. Young.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yep. So the next generation, say somebody under the age of 25 now.
Well,
do you think they're going to have the same kind of shot at owning a home? Like that home that you got for $176, it's now $700. Like, do they stand a chance anymore?
I don't think so.
No.
I have, I'm going to have 4 kids. In March, I'll be up to 4. And, we have to look out for our kids. So we ended up, we're trying to buy an investment property for a few years. And finally, we lucked out last year. So we have one, and we bought that, solely for our kids. So they'll have something.
Right. Okay. Like an appreciating asset for your children. Good for you. All right. Well done, Derek. Thank you for calling. We'll be right back on the phone lines during the Talkback Hour. How much did you pay for your first house? Rob Snow Show, City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -9, in Smiths Falls, -7. And here's what's making news this hour. The province is seeing a 3.5% positive rate from its latest COVID testing numbers. That means from over 40,200 tests that were done, there are 1,290 new cases of COVID today, along with 10 more deaths. Now, 36 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 20 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 19 new cases in Eastern Ontario, and Renfrew is counting 14. Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Vera Etches, says children between the ages of 5 and 11 are an important group to be vaccinated against COVID-19 now that we are in the holiday gathering season. That can be much safer the more people have the shot. Etches says so far 40% of those aged 5 to 11 have received their first dose. Renfrew County Health Unit says the wait time on its COVID vaccination info line is up to 1.5 hours this morning. It suggests booking online is the quickest and easiest way to make an appointment. COVID is one of the reasons being blamed for higher food prices, with the supply chain being affected. Prices on the rise this year will continue to a level not seen in our history next year. A family of 4 will see their grocery bill rise an average $1,000 to $14,000 next year. City News Time, 10:33. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Just a footnote to that news report about the higher bills at the grocery store. $1,000 extra for the year for food. Extra for the year for food, right? I mean, you have to take home the $1,000 first after tax. So for an average, you have to make $1,300 or $1,400 to be able to buy $1,000 worth of groceries because we all have only after-tax income. You have to keep that money. You have to go out and earn the money first, right? But anyway, we're talking about real estate. We're talking about real estate this morning, and we're watching these house prices go up, year after year, up 19% in the last year, according to the Ottawa Real Estate Board. $719,000 for a house now in Ottawa. Average price. So if you're a Gen X or a baby boomer, how much did you pay for your first house? That's what I want to know. How old were you when you bought your first house? What was the interest rate, if you can remember? The interest rate, a lot of news, of course, lately about interest rates. Had the Bank of Canada announcement yesterday. Interest rates expected to go up next year, maybe 4 interest rate hikes next year, and then 2 the year after is what our economist expert told us yesterday. How much money were you making at the time? That's important because it's all relative, right? And then think about the next generation, Gen Z, someone 25 years of age or younger right now. Do you think they're going to have the same shot at owning a home that you had? Lots of news about the housing market in the last week or so. There's a new survey about Gen Z and how Gen Z feels about its prospects of owning a home. Although I don't really like these surveys that say Gen Z says this and Gen Z says that. Like everybody in Gen Z is just, they're robots and they all think the same way. We're like a bunch of drones, right? The Borg, like they're the Borg with the hive mind.
Well, we had our AGM, and that's what came out.
Yeah, okay. It's bleak. It's bleak. But it's not as bleak as I thought it would be when I clicked on the news report. Gen Z hasn't totally given up, resigned themselves to the idea of never owning a home. So this was done on behalf of Sotheby's Realty Canada. And some of the results aren't all that surprising, just given where home prices are right now. But let me give you some of the highlights, and then I'll get back on the phones. No specific data for Ottawa. They looked at the markets in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Calgary. But given the loftiness of Ottawa home prices nowadays, I'm sure the attitudes here are not that much different. So when these Gen Zers were asked, do you think you'll ever be able to afford a home to call your own? The most confident Gen Zers are in Montreal and Calgary. The least confident are in Toronto and Vancouver. The big worry, though, is they're not going to be able to buy a home in their community of choice. In other words, I'd love to live in Vancouver, but I'm never going to be able to buy a home in Vancouver or in Toronto or in Montreal or in Calgary. That they're going to have to end up moving outside of the city. The so-called drive till you qualify phenomena. Not that surprising. If they had their choice, if it was possible, the survey suggests Gen Z really wants to own single-family homes. Not townhomes and condos and row houses. Single-family homes, okay? The picture-perfect front yard, backyard, white picket fence, the whole shebang. That's what they want. And the survey says the desire to own a single-family home is no different for the next generation than it was for previous generations. They want what their parents had or their grandparents had. Okay? They want their own little slice of paradise. They are hopeful. It's between 70 and 80% of respondents said they think they will be able to buy a home, quote, in their lifetime. In their lifetime. 70 to 80%. So that's higher than I thought it would be. I thought a lot of them would have thrown in the towel by now. The biggest challenge, they say, getting into the housing market, again, no great revelation, cited in this survey, saving for the down payment while at the same time trying to pay for everything else. The extra $1,000 on the grocery bill doesn't help. But again, no great shocker there. But they're an optimistic bunch. They are confident that they will eventually be able to afford a home of their own. So that's one of the housing market items that has been in the news recently. Daunting task. It's a daunting task for that generation, though. What I want to get at with your help is just how daunting it is compared to when you were buying your first home. Dan in Orleans. Good morning, Dan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
Oh, man, your first caller kind of tweaked me, so I had to call.
Oh, tweaked you? Okay.
He, I mean, it was just kind of this mentality that people need to work hard enough to get to...
Have to make sacrifices. You have to make sacrifices, Dan. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm in my late 30s. We just bought a home for the first time last year and got in about halfway through that monumental increase in Ottawa, so we just made it. We couldn't afford it today.
You couldn't afford that. Even today, the house you bought 2 years ago, you couldn't afford today.
We would not have been able to get in with the down payment we had, no.
Wow. Holy smokes.
So we're lucky, but so much has changed since people bought homes in their 60s and 70s, and there's been so much downloading of costs, like particularly around post-secondary education. It used to be free.
Well, pretty much free. Pretty much
free.
Yeah.
People come out now, and if they're doing a professional designation like a lawyer, dentist, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to grapple, and it takes a decade before you can get anywhere near kind of being comfortable and being able to save significantly for a down payment. So all that to say, the world has changed.
Okay.
And as a millennial, I feel...
Like you say you're a millennial, Dan. You say you're a millennial. Like, there's a 20-year thing there. But like, how old did you say you were? You may have told me, I'm sure.
Mid-30s.
Mid-30s. Okay, fair enough. All right. Yeah, okay.
So, I'm on the top end of it. But
on the top end. Okay, all right.
But yeah, guys like your producer, I just think like, okay, they're being told they need to bootstrap it to find a down payment and then, just save and be more conservative at travel, et cetera, et cetera.
I tell David, sell the Ferrari, David, sell it.
That's right. That's not realistic. These people, like, it's such a different world. And if you're of an older generation, I would just say talk to people who are going through it and understand the pressures. That's that thing that came out from StatsCan or CMHC a few months ago about, like, we're experiencing right now the largest download or transfer of intergenerational wealth with the housing market because parents are buying their kids homes because that's the only way they can do it.
Right. Or giving them tens of thousands of dollars for the down payment.
That's
it's like
right.
$80-something thousand for the down payment.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in places like Vancouver, Toronto, it's like $170,000 or something. It's just nuts. So, like, unless you have understanding parents, you're hooped.
Okay.
Anyway.
Can I ask you how much you paid for that house?
Yeah, we got a townhouse for about $450.
$450. Okay.
And now it's probably closer to $6.
Wow. Okay.
In a year, which is insane.
In a year, yeah, it's insane. Yeah, it is. You're right. You're right.
Anyway.
All right. Thank you. Great points.
Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. John in Watson's Corners. John.
Hey, how goes it?
It goes. It goes with or without me, John. It always goes. How much you pay for your first house?
So we bought our farm 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, and we paid what was it, $140 for
Watson's Corners in Watson's
Corners. About
Corners.
45 minutes from Carlton Place towards Perth.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
$140,000. Holy cow.
Yeah. I can't even afford to live here anymore. Like,
why not?
Lucked out because.
What do you mean you can't afford to live there anymore? What do you mean?
Oh, like if we were to sell our house now, it's like in our area, there's nothing for this price anymore.
Oh, really? I see. Everything's gone up. You mean everything's right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's bonkers.
Really?
But yeah.
Are they building a lot of houses out that way, John?
Yeah. There's actually a lot of folks are moving out from the city out this way.
Okay.
Just because, everyone can work remotely now.
Right.
So you're getting a lot of new houses popping up everywhere. And yeah, even some of the old beater houses are going for like mad money.
Mad money. Right. So you feel lucky that you got in when you did, John. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, I was born in 94.
94. Okay. All right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I could do it now.
No.
Like and that was just like 5 years ago, like that quick of a jump.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So somebody, the younger person coming behind you, how do you feel about their prospects?
Ooh, it's grim. I'll give them that. I don't know how they're gonna.
No, David is nodding his head in agreement there. Yeah, it's grim. You're right, it's grim. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Thanks, John. Thank you. Yeah.
No worries.
Bye. Bruce in Carlton Place. Bruce.
Hey,
Yeah,
I
Bruce?
bought my first house in Ottawa for $45,000.
$45,000?
Yeah, it was a townhouse.
A townhouse. Okay. What year was that? Do you know?
1975.
1975. Whereabouts?
Hunt Club.
In Hunt Club, $45,000.
Right. I sold it in 1983 for $85,000.
Wow. Okay.
Bought a house in Carleton Place, a single house for $85,000.
For $85,000. Okay. Yeah.
Sold that in 2000 for $145,000.
You're like Trump, Bruce. You're like Trump wheeling and dealing with the real estate.
Well, yeah, and then I also had a young lad that needed a place to live, and we bought a rental property, and we bought that for $160,000. A small house that was built in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I'm told I can get $450 for that now.
Good for you. Good for you,
But,
Bruce.
You know, when I was a young person at 25, when I bought my first house.
25. Okay. All right.
Okay, we were only making $13,000 a year.
Sure.
We had to have a 20% down payment, and we ended
And
up.
what was it like to try and save for that at that time, Bruce?
I didn't. I borrowed the money from my parents.
You did? Okay. All right.
Because there was, at that time, there was a grant from the federal government that would give you $5,000 towards a down payment. So we had to have the money from our parents so that we could purchase it, and then we made a claim, and 4 months later, we got the $5,000 back.
All right. Do you remember the interest rates at the time,
Yep.
Bruce?
It was 8.5.
8.5.
And then when it came up for renewal 5 years later, this was just when mortgage brokers started. So, the bank was wanting, I think it was like 15%, and the mortgage broker at the time came in and gave a deal for the whole condo association of 13.5.
That was the deal, 13.5. That was a good rate.
It was a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, because, like a year later, it was 18, 19.
Wow.
And yes, it's a struggle for
now,
some
Bruce, that townhouse in Hunt Club, you said it was, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Is it still there, do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
What do you
it
figure
was,
that townhouse is worth these days, Bruce?
I have no idea. I haven't checked it for a while, but they were all put up by Terran Properties, and there was like 144 in one division, another one. And that's, the thing that you said to your producer is that when we moved from Montreal to Ottawa, like, I could have bought a single house in Montreal for $45,000 on the West Island.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the young people, well, I know lots of young people, and they have everything they want, and money is no object because it's so cheap. So, you don't have to live in Ottawa. You can live outside in Carleton Place. That's how we got a house, because it was less expensive.
Even Carleton Place now is.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's very my house.
Especially,
a lot of money.
they twin the highway. I mean, Carleton Place basically suburb of Ottawa now.
Yes, it is. Well, so is our part, but there's all kinds of people I know that drive from Renfrew into Ottawa.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and you look at the price of housing in Renfrew, and it's $450.
Yep, it's gone mad too. Like one of our callers said, Gananoque. His daughter bought a house in Gananoque, a fixer-upper in Gananoque, $400 and some thousand.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
And there's people that commute from Brockville. I mean, when we lived in Montreal, we didn't live in Montreal. We lived in a suburb. It was 25, 30 miles out. You drove an hour every day.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, Bruce, I got to run, Bruce, a little bit over time, but thanks. Thank you, Bruce. Great points. Be right back. Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour, City News.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Borrowed Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Ear Gear in the 90s. And then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque, that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment, because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
How much did you pay for your first house? How old were you at the time? What kind of money were you making? What kind of work were you doing? Do you think the younger generation has a shot at ever owning a house? $719,956. $719,956 was the average selling price of a residential class property in Ottawa in November of 2021, last month, according to the Ottawa Real Estate Board, which has price data going back almost 10 years on its website. It goes all the way back to January of 2012. I looked it up this morning. January 2012, so 10 years ago. The average sale price for a condo was $253,000, and the average sale price for a residential class property, which is everything else, was $373,000. $373,000, okay? 10 years ago. So condo prices in 10 years are up 70%. Home prices in 10 years in Ottawa are up 93% in a decade. And the dreams of young people are being crushed. So I went and I compared those numbers. I wanted to compare those numbers to wages. StatsCan measures wages using its term average weekly earnings. So in 2012, the average weekly earnings for the average Canadian worker, averages, okay? 10 years ago, it was $870 a week. $45,000 a year. If you were making $45,000 a year 10 years ago, that was considered an average income. The latest number from StatsCan on that is $1,136 a week, which is $59,000 a year. That's average. So condo prices are up 70%. Prices for homes up 93% in 10 years. Average weekly earnings over the same time period up 30%. Up 30%. Not nearly enough, right, to keep up with the rising cost of housing. Colin in Canada, you're on City News. Good morning.
All right, I'll give you the stats.
All right.
I was 27 years old.
27.
I was making about $36,000 a year doing home delivery of groceries in my own business, so I was self-employed.
Right.
My wife was probably making just a little less than that. So combined income of maybe $60,000 a year. The first house we bought was $140,000. It was a 1,200 square foot bungalow on a 50 by 100 lot in Elmville Acres. There are houses on that street selling today for $700,000 plus.
Wow. Holy smokes.
So, but I wanted, and I've recently, and then 18 years ago, I moved to Canada in Glencairn, bought a 2-story, 4-bedroom, 50 by 100 lot, much bigger house for $240,000. And I'm not even sure what the houses are selling for in my neighborhood now, but they got to be pushing $800,000 at this point.
Wow.
But it's interesting that study you cited that said 70% of the Gen Xers and whatever want to have the house, but they want to have the single family house.
Yeah, they want to have a single family house.
They want a yard well, if you look at what the governments are doing, municipal governments, Ottawa included, across the province and across the country, they're not allowing for that. If you look at the official plans, and I don't want to get too technical here, but if you look at the new official plan for Ottawa, the building of single-family houses within a decade will be non-existent. You will not be able to, there'll be no new single-family houses being built because they want to get rid of what they call the R1 zoning. So a 50 by 100 lot will have 4 units on it, not one.
Yeah. Infill, intensification, density. That's the big theme for them.
They say Ottawa's going to grow to at least 1.5 million people in the next 25 years.
Yeah.
And the plan calls for 60% of the units for those new people to live in to be built infill, intensification.
Yeah.
So if you live in a neighborhood now that has single-family homes and they change the zoning, and you just have to ask people in the Glebe and Westboro and Heron Park and places like that, they're all starting to change. People are tearing down those single-family homes, and they're building 2 and 3 units.
Oh, yeah, it's happening
right
all
now,
over the place.
today.
Yeah. Gotta go. Tight on time. Yep. Chantel, Ottawa. Chantel.
Good morning.
Good morning. How much did you pay for your first house?
I paid $110,000.
$110,000 here in Ottawa?
No, Ottawa at that time was about $130,000, $140,000. So we looked outside of Ottawa in Morwood.
Morwood. Okay, I'm not
to go
sure.
to near Chesterville.
Oh, near Chesterville. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Morwood Homes. So
you were lived in the suburbs of Chesterville.
Yeah, that's it. You blink and you miss it.
Okay. What kind of house was it for that price?
It's a bungalow, 3-bedroom.
3-bedroom bungalow.
One and a half bath, 3/4 acre lot.
Right. Okay.
And we paid off our mortgage when we were in our 40s.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Wow. You still live there?
Yeah.
You still live in the same house? Wow.
So we renovated it.
Yeah.
So we now have 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. So if we put it up on the market, it probably go for at least 4.
At least 4. Good for you, Chantel. Thank you. Yeah, interesting. Maybe 2 calls in here, maybe 1. Margot.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Margot. How much you pay for your first house?
Well, actually, it'd be my husband, and I believe it was in the 80s. He paid about $48,000.
Wow.
And it was more so, the 2 points here. The young man that says upper education was paid for, and he was talking about that. Back in the early 80s, late 70s, we were earning $3 an hour, and when we came out with our BA, we owned $. So we didn't get free education, and we never expected in our early years to get our full basic house. We started out with a junky little house down in Little Italy and made our way up.
Right, okay.
But I do
junky little house.
But I do understand that 13 years ago we bought a house in Enville Acres, a very small house. And we bought it for $300,000, and now we could probably get over $600,000 for it.
Wow. All right. Thank you, Margot. Thank you. Gotcha. Yep. I think that's it. We got to go. Yeah, we've been late all morning, and we're starting to get heck around here. Be right back after the 11 o'clock news. Tomorrow's the Friday free-for-all, so if you didn't get on this, we can call tomorrow, okay? At 750-1310 on City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 9th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -9 degrees. It's -7 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Chief Medical Officer of Health in Ottawa updated the COVID situation with a bit of good and bad news. Dr. Vera Etches says a fifth case of the Omicron variant has now been detected in the city. But Etches says overall vaccination rates are good, especially with children between the ages of 5 and 11 catching up.
82% of eligible residents are fully vaccinated, and 87% have received at least one dose. And I'm incredibly pleased to see the progress we are making with children in the 5 to 11 age group. More than 40% have put on a brave face and rolled up their sleeve and received their first dose. There's still a lot of capacity for children's immunization, so please book your child's appointment today.
Etches says the risk of COVID infections does keep growing, and this means vaccinations are even more important. Now, the province is seeing a 3.5% positive rate from the latest round of COVID testing numbers. From over 40,200 tests that were done, there are 1,290 new cases province-wide today, along with 10 additional deaths. Now, 36 of the new cases are in Ottawa. That's a drop from yesterday, but 20 are in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 19 in Eastern Ontario, Renfrew counting 14 additional cases of COVID-19. City News Time, 11:03. Now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Varying amounts of sun and cloud, the high just -5. Tonight, periods of snow, especially through the overnight hours, 2 to 3 centimeters, the low -9. And then Friday, flurries in the morning, not as cold, the high +2. For today, the high -5.
And right now in Ottawa, -9 degrees. It's -7 in Smiths Falls. Now, the World Health Organization is warning fears of the Omicron variant could be leading to new COVID-19 vaccine hoarding. It says it would complicate the global effort to stamp out this pandemic. Once again, the WHO's expert panel on vaccination advising governments to send vaccine doses to poorer countries rather than administer booster shots to their own citizens. In Ontario, those booster shots have been expanded to those 50 and older. You can register for that if you're in that age group, starting on Monday. Now, if you think your grocery bill was expensive this year, 2022 is going to be even more of a consumer headache. Latest forecast for food prices projecting the biggest single-year increase ever. In fact, an average family of 4 in Canada expects to spend more than $1,000 more next year on groceries than they did this year. That means a total bill for the year of about $14,000. A huge community push means big cash and a big pile of food being donated to the Ottawa Food Bank. During the annual OC Transpo Loblaw Christmas Food Drive, 103,000 pounds of food collected, along with $15,000 in cash. All the food items are delivered directly to the food bank. The food covered the Stittsville Food Bank and Canada Food covered as well. City News Time, 11:04. It could be the final day of the government case against Ghislaine Maxwell. She's on trial in New York for recruiting and grooming girls for the late Jeffrey Epstein.
The testimony of one of Jeffrey Epstein's private pilots put Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell on a 1994 flight from Michigan, where an accuser identified as Jane has said she met the pair when she was 14. Pilot David Rogers said Jane flew 4 times on Epstein's plane and Maxwell was on each of those flights. Maxwell is charged with enticing Jane and other minors for Epstein to abuse. The last accuser to testify is Annie Farmer, whose allegations date to 1995 when she was 16. The defense case is expected to begin next week. Aaron Katursky, ABC News, New York.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, so let's talk some city affairs. Municipal Affairs panel has assembled. Walter Robinson is former chief of staff to Mayor Larry O'Brien. Good morning, Walter.
Good morning. I'm looking forward to chatting about Disney Hall.
Alex Cullen is here. He's a former city councillor and a former MPP. And good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning, Rob, and to Walter as well.
Yes, and so this is great because Alex is, you know, you're known for being on more of the left side of things, Alex, and Walter is known for not being over there with you.
He's slowly coming across. Slowly. Mark, I am middle of the road. Middle of the road.
Okay.
Middle of my sinking road.
The middle of your road. Okay. Yeah. The thing is, where Walter lives, you can only make right turns. So,
even to go left, I got to go do 3 rights.
The latest city budget passed yesterday, and we have some audio of the mayor. This is how the mayor describes the budget. Roll tape.
It's far too easy to simply say yes to a group of people that shows up demanding more money. But at the end of the day, the money comes from taxpayers, and we have to respect the fact that we cannot push them, many of them living on the edge, not being able to make mortgage payments or rent payments. And we have to be respectful that we don't want to push more people into poverty.
Okay, so that's the mayor. Says it's another pandemic budget. Ottawa residents need a budget that offers stability. Obviously, not everyone agrees. Councillor McKenney called it the worst budget in 8 years. This is Councillor McKenney.
I think there were some of the same people that said it was the worst budget last year.
McKenney. So let's play the Councillor McKenney. Oh, I thought you had a Councillor McKenney clip. Okay, that's my fault. Okay, believe me, she did not like the budget. Okay, what do you think of the budget, Alex?
Well, I'm not impressed. We hear every time from the mayor that have to hold the line and can't have to worry about pushing people into poverty. I've yet to see property taxes push anybody into poverty. But the fact of the matter is, it's a stay the course budget with a big gaping hole on the transit side. It's stay the course. It's 3%. It's what we obviously have expected from Jim Watson over the past 10 years. So very little that's new there. Some disappointment if you expected to see something on addressing the housing crisis that we have in the city, some disappointment in terms of addressing climate change in the city. But the real problem is the assumption that we're going to get back to 80% transit ridership during this pandemic. That's, in Technicolor, that thought, and it just leaves a gaping hole that the new council will have to address once it comes back.
Okay. Walter Robinson, your thoughts on the budget, please.
I'm going to agree with Alex on the transit stuff. That's just, as I called it, Disney Hall. Tinkerbell showed up and gave us pixie dust and ridership projections that have not been met in major cities like New York, Montreal, Toronto, and or like London, the places that have huge transit ridership compared to what we have, which is a rush hour ridership and not a day-long ridership. Yep. But to show respect for taxpayers and ratepayers, to steal Jim Watson's line, you need to build a budget based in reality and actual economic reality and facts and projections. That was an exercise at Disney Hall. That was not befitting for a small town council, let alone a major metropolitan capital and the capital of a G7 country. This budget is garbage. I choose that word deliberately based on...
That's pretty harsh. That's pretty harsh, Walter.
No, it starts with, it's like the old programming language, garbage in, garbage out, GIGO. And let's come to the reality of 82% ridership. In what world is that happening? Is that some metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg has with different glasses? I mean, it's not. Yeah. I mean, and that just underpins, that just puts the whole exercise in question. And then the stuff around the policing budget, where I think there's violent agreement that people think there's a variety of things that the police service should not be doing in social services.
Yeah. Look, because both of you have latched onto the transit budget, and it's certainly something I wanted to talk about. So let's get right into that. One of my questions, I'm thinking back to Councillor Rainer Blois, who used to say, we have to have honesty in our budgeting. We have to be honest in budgeting. To me, it's just not an honest transit budget, and I don't know how councillors or the mayor can base a transit budget on a ridership forecast 80% of pre-pandemic levels. I agree with both of you. I think it's hopelessly out of touch. I was listening to an American newscast just the other day. New York City's transit system has 40% ridership of what it was prior to the pandemic, and it is New York is a transit-oriented city. They don't even have, there's not one gas station on the entire island of Manhattan. Okay? Everybody takes transit in New York. Whether you're a rich stockbroker on Wall Street or somebody, working at Subway takes the subway. So if transit is at 40% in a place like New York City, where it's ingrained into the culture, what does that say about transit here? What does that say about transit here, Alex? Well, it's just hopeless.
We're sitting at 30%, and we used to be considered a role model of mid-sized cities for our transit ridership. But we were suffering two things. For the past 10 years, ridership has stagnated because we've had constant fare increases, but the pandemic has changed the whole ball of wax. With work from home, and that's a phenomenon that has not been factored into future budgets, because that changes how people live, work, and play. But the fact that they are expecting 80% of transit ridership to be the level for next year, and if that doesn't happen, who's going to pay the difference? And the response from staff is, well, we'll go back to the federal government because they did it the last time. I mean, that's just purely irresponsible. So it means the new council coming in, and we still have unresolved the issue of the fare increases, because there's still a scheduled 2.5% fare increase for 2022. Once the trains start running, maybe they'll never run. But
if they get to 15 trains, I don't even know if we've ever had 15 trains running.
But that's coming. But the whole long-term financial plan is predicated on 2.5% fare increases every year. And guess what? There is price elasticity. The prices go up, people consume less transit. So the debate that we've had about free transit, now I don't know when that's going to happen, but the argument is, if we make it cheaper, more people will use it. But you have this big phenomenon of the pandemic, and until the dust settles,
Alex, just hold on, Walter. And Alex, the problems with light rail have not helped either. The breakdowns, derailments, these sorts of things, that's not helped build any kind of confidence in the reliability of transit. You got to have confidence that it's actually going to get you where you need to go. Right.
That was the point I was going to build.
Yeah, go ahead, Walter.
I don't discount Alex's analysis. It makes sense. And the other thing on the prices, There are still so many trips that OC Transpo doesn't. I'm out in Orleans. We were the people who drove the ridership numbers on the 20s and 30 series buses. We had 30% ridership going in, more than any other part of the city. We're very proud of that. A lot of people, I would take the light rail when it worked, park and just take a bus or whatever it was. The key issue is that they did not address yesterday is A, the fact that work from home is here for good for many, many people. Yep. Secondly, the confidence factor. People are, it's confidence. If I get on a train at Country's Pasture or if I get on a train at Blair, will it actually get me downtown? There's a confidence factor and there's a safety factor, and selling this back to the Ottawa Transit public is a monumental task. Nobody's talked about that. But they just, business as usual. And to come back to the other point that Alex made, October 24th, 2022, this budget is kicking things down the road for people who will sit around, the 24 people who sit around that table come November 15th or December 1, 2022. And that's the other thing to come back. You need to address these problems now. Yes. And say what you don't know.
All right, so look, Alex doesn't like the budget. Walter doesn't like the budget. I have questions about the budget. As I said, Councillor McKenney, worst budget ever. This is what Mayor Watson says to all of you critics out there, and I guess that includes me. Roll tape on clip number 2, Jim Watson.
I think there were some of the same people that said it was the worst budget last year, so there is that consistency. I don't share that view. I think it's a very solid, progressive budget where we're investing in helping those individuals who have suffered greatly as a result of the pandemic, whether through losing their jobs or mental health issues that they're dealing with. I think what we tried to do is to make sure that the budget is affordable. As I said, it's always easy to spend someone else's money.
It's always easy to spend someone else's money. That's the mayor. That's what the mayor says about critics like you, Alex Cullen.
Well, he's going to have to face up to the criticism about dealing with the challenges of the pandemic, the impact on transit, the impact on the downtown in the coming months, because we're going into an election, and how is any responsible politician going to deal with it? You just can't put on rose-colored glasses and expect senior levels of government to bail you out. I mean, he even thinks that senior levels of government will pay for the LRT going out to Canada and Barrhaven. Well, that's a topic for another day, but he's going to have to answer hard questions. Every candidate's going to have to answer hard questions, because if that money's not coming, then what? And that is the real question.
Okay. Look, LRT Stage 2, we're going to get an update on this from Fedco, I guess, on the 17th. Rumors are flying all over the place that it's going to be revealed this project is behind. I hear the rumors that it's behind by at least a year. Anybody hearing that? Anybody hearing things like that?
I would be surprised if it is only a year, and I'm going by what happened in Stage 1, en route 2017, en route 2018, en route 2019. So I think, and the other thing is, and we've chatted this on the show before. I'm looking at the time, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do remember looking at some of the original projections of where they are and some of the realignment that continues to happen on my part of the 174. And the question would be, if you're behind, why are you behind? Is it supplies? Is it raw materials? Has the construction stuff been impacted by global supply chain issues?
You would have to think so.
You would. Yeah. You could think that because it hasn't been because you had too much traffic.
No, that's not it.
Or had the opposite. The road closures are very bearable when they're closing bridges and realigning exits and drainage ditches and other things. These are. I mean, it's a feat of engineering. So the question is why? It wasn't because hundreds of staff got COVID, fortunately. So why is it behind? That's the real issue. Why and how much?
Alex, out in your neighborhood there, where they're like realigning whole, the parkway, the parks, everything else out there. It's quite an obstacle course there. Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway to accommodate Phase 2 of Light. What's your sense of where we are with this Phase 2? What do you think we're going to hear?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've been working hard, and there's been a lot of stuff going on in the West End as it goes from Tenny's Pasture out to Moody Drive, really, through Bayshore. So the work has been progressing, that's obvious. But, I mean, Walter's right. Are there supply chain problems? I would suspect as well that despite every engineering plan, you put the shovels into the ground, you discover, oops, there's a sewer here we forgot, oops, there's some rock here that we didn't anticipate, which is pretty normal. The issue is, if it's going to be delayed, who pays for it? Is this going to be on the backs of the consortium? And if it's on the backs of the consortium, then what are they going to shortchange on to balance their books? So there's an implication. We need to know what it is, and we need to know how it's going to be handled, so that at the end of the day, we get the product that we expect, which is a viable LRT system running from end to end of town.
And just on that, Rob, just to Alex's point, let's the elephant in the room, the inquiry in the room, in terms of the assumptions that have been made for Phase 2 timetables, timing, how they've structured, how they project managed, and all the engineering that, as Alex rightly points out, you run into engineering challenges. It's like when you do your house, you're like, oh, I didn't know that was behind the wall. Right. And then let's come back and marry that report, and let's look 6 months into the future when we get the sense of the terms of the inquiry and the reporting periods, and say, okay, were some of those same assumptions made in Phase 1? So now we've made those same assumptions in Phase 2. What does that mean? So there's going to be a bit of a circle and a retrospective perspective, kind of back and forth between this report and the Inquirer. It's going to be fascinating.
Okay, we'll be right back. Municipal Affairs, Rob Snow Show, City News.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manatik, the Manatik Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house. 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out of our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay. We're back with Alex Cullen, Walter Robinson, Rob Snow here, talking municipal affairs. And I should say, gentlemen, if we do say anything that happens to offend anybody in advance, we would like to issue this apology, which is one for the ages. Thank you, Jan Harder.
That's unfortunate, and I withdraw what I didn't hear me say.
I withdraw what I didn't hear me say. That is one.
I heard "Shut up, Riley."
Shut up, Riley.
Shut up, Riley. I heard it.
It was very clear.
Okay. I withdraw what I didn't hear me say. Okay. That is priceless. That's classic. I love it. Okay. The police budget, the original ask was 2.86%. The police carved it down to 2%. There were lots of calls for a freeze to the police budget or deep cuts to the police budget. I mean, the so-called People's Alternative Budget wanted to cut $133 million from the police budget. But in the end, 2% was approved. What do you think, Walter? What do you think of how that played out?
I think it's an exercise in the political reality of the day, being squeezed. I think, similar to my other comments, so the People's Alternative Budget and defund the police, I chuckle when people talk about defunding the police, because I've seen it in Seattle and other places when the people who led for the defund the police movement, and then somebody protested at their home and they called the police. I think the challenge is in that space is, as I think Alex would agree, there's a variety of things that the police service, Chief Soley and others themselves say, we don't need to be there. There's got to be alternate ways to deal with mental health calls, to deal with opioid and overdose calls. There's a variety of things that need, and other agencies and other people that would be better placed to de-escalate those situations and attend to them and figure out if they need police support as a backup. The bigger challenge is, I think, some of the guns and gangs issues, some of the deaths of young youths in our community, which are on the rise. Young youth, sorry, it's a bit of an oxymoron using the word twice. And the stuff that some of this has now moved into suburbs, not just in what you would call people where you think, oh, that happened in somebody else's neighborhood. And then the other challenge we have in the police services is the confidence in various racialized communities and real challenges there, where you are going to need funds and need outreach and need to listen and need a visible presence of listening and engaging. That costs money. So I think that there's bigger challenges, just like the transit stuff. The larger challenges are one of confidence and community cohesion. And a budget's not going to solve those things, but there do need to be investments in that direction.
Okay, Alex, on the police budget, how that played out. Your thoughts, please.
Well, I had to say I was very disappointed in Jim Watson's characterization that he wasn't going to support anything that would reduce frontline officers. That was never on the table. Chief Slowly made it very clear that even going to 2%, they were still going to be hiring 20 more officers. The police force was going to continue to expand. What you saw, though, at council was a political compromise as baby steps, but at least the debate has been launched about what's the best use of taxpayers' dollars to deal with crime. Obviously, you have to deal with criminal activities when it happens, but are there better ways of dealing with those calls that don't involve crime, that involve people who are homeless, who involve people with mental health issues? And that debate's open. That's a very worthwhile debate to have. The Coalition of Community Health Resource Centers made an excellent brief to Community Protective Services Committee on the community well-being plan that showed here are the investments you could make that would relieve some of the burden from police, but would have more effect in the community dealing with youth issues, mental health, homelessness. And so at least this was a beginning. And of course, with the election coming up, this debate's not over. But it's never wrong at any time to say what's the best use of our tax dollars in dealing with a problem. Obviously, we're going to have police, but do we need police to respond to a mental health crisis? Maybe not.
Okay, we'll have 1 minute, so as short as answer as possible. Sometime in the next 3 weeks, Jim Watson will announce his political future, whether he will seek re-election or call it a career as mayor of Ottawa. What do you think he's going to do, Walter Robinson?
I think he's going to run again, and it's in his blood. He is an amazing campaigner. I do not take that away from Jim at all. He has a sense of the city. He breathes it. he can announce that he's going to run, and lots of people enter and file their papers on May 1st when they're allowed to. My question is, how many people are actually on the ballot, the mayoral ballot, on October 24th? I think that's an open question.
Alex?
Well, I'm with Walter on that one. Quite frankly, I don't think Jim has anything better to do, anything else to do. I mean, what would he do if he wasn't mayor of Ottawa? So without some place for him to, occupy his energies and time, he's running again. Okay. He's the incumbent. He's got a track record. I think, though, it's going to be a much harder hill for him to climb with LRT and police and all the other issues that
library.
Oh, library as well. I mean,
Lansdowne Park.
Can't be 10 years in office without accumulating baggage.
All right.
And
okay.
he should be tested.
Thank you to both of you. Great stuff. Wonderful. Talk soon. Bye-bye. Alex Cullen, former city councillor. Walter Robinson, former chief of staff to Mayor O'Brien. Municipal Affairs panel. Rob Snow Show back after the news on City News.
And the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 9th of December. Good morning. I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, mostly cloudy, -8. It's -7 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Good news, bad news on COVID-19 in Ottawa. The capital's top doctor says the 5th case of the Omicron variant has been detected here, and she's worried about the number of COVID cases in children. But when it comes to vaccination, kids in the age group 5 to 11 are rolling up their sleeves, and now 82% of eligible residents in Ottawa have been fully vaccinated. In Renfrew County, long wait times on the COVID vaccine info phone line today, up to 1.5 hours this morning. The Renfrew County Health Unit suggests booking your vaccination appointment online. COVID, one of the reasons being blamed for higher food prices, with the supply chain being affected. Prices on the rise this year are expected to continue to a level not seen in history. Experts warn the average family of 4 will see their grocery bill rise by about $1,000 next year. The parent company of the Sobeys grocery store chain is reporting a second quarter profit of $175.4 million. That's up from $161.4 million a year ago. Empire says its results were helped by a nearly 5% increase in sales, as well as things like its acquisition of the Longo's supermarket chain and the expansion of Farm Boy. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's talk about COVID-19, our fight against COVID-19. Latest on the Omicron variant. Rapid testing, the merits of rapid testing. Dr. Donald Vinn is with us on City News, infectious disease specialist, medical microbiologist at the McGill University Health Center. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Hi, how are you?
It's great to hear from you. I thank you so much for taking the time. So we have a big case number here in Ottawa today, in Ontario today, 1,290 province-wide, maybe a similar number out of Quebec later today. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But certainly cases have tracked higher. How would you describe the current situation with COVID-19 right now?
In one word, it's concerning. It's concerning because what you just mentioned are the high community transmission rates in Ontario are also going on in Quebec. In fact, 1,800 was the announcement today. So, we know that over the last week, we're consistently over 1,000. That's a lot of community transmission. And therefore, there's a risk that as you have high community transmission, you will eventually get high hospitalizations. So far, we've been okay with the hospitalizations, not great, but not bad. But the concern, of course, is that if the fire keeps raging, there will be consequences, and those consequences will be hospitalizations and deaths, and that's why we're all concerned.
Why do you think the hospitals seem to be holding up fairly well right now? What explains that? Is that because of vaccines, doctor?
Absolutely. So let's not forget there's two important things here, right? One is transmission, and the other one is protection. Protection from being hospitalized, protection from dying. And we know that the vaccines are excellent at that, and we know that across the board in Canada, we have really good rates of vaccination. So that's probably our buffer zone. That's probably what's been protecting us so far, from having massive hospitalizations and threatening our health system surge capacities. But of course, you don't want to play with fire.
Okay. When it comes to the Omicron variant here in the Ottawa area, we're reporting one new case, and I suppose that's just going to be the way it is. From what experts have told us, they expect Omicron to become the dominant variant sooner. It's just a matter of time before it becomes the dominant variant. Is that what you believe, Doctor? What do you believe?
Well, to be honest with you, I still think it's a little bit early. We obviously need to see what happens in different scenarios. What we have seen in South Africa is that it is spreading like, again, not to go back to the analogy of fire, but it's spreading like wildfire. But of course, in South Africa and the other parts of Africa where we can see it, you have very low rates of full vaccination, and you have high rates of people who are previously naturally infected. So that's a warning sign, right? That's a warning sign that Omicron can cause reinfection in people who are naturally infected. That is a major concern. But, when we talk about Omicron as being, the next dominant variant strain, I don't think that really necessarily matters in the grand scheme of things, because right now, Delta is our major threat, and we need to make sure that the measures are in place to protect us against Delta, because if they are, they're actually going to protect us against Omicron.
What sort of measures?
Well, we need to address two issues: transmission and protection. Okay. So protection means that we need to get people adequately vaccinated, and that, by the way, means.
Well, we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world.
Yes, we do have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world.
But it's not high enough?
Well, the 10% of your population is unvaccinated, and you have a huge number of people in your population. 10% still ends up being a lot. But the vaccination rate protects you against against disease. The effects on transmission are less impressive, if you will. But we still need to get people adequately vaccinated, and that, by the way, in the context of Delta variant and possibly Omicron variant, and actually with Omicron variant, there's data that just came out to that effect, is that means you need 3 doses. So we need to move from the paradigm of 2 doses is adequate to now realizing that you need a 3rd dose at this moment. That's for the protection part. For the transmission part, that really does mean we need to strongly reconsider all the physical measures that we've had to deal with for the last year and a half that have been relaxed in some parts of the country. The adequate masking, not this flimsy cloth masking, but true airborne protection masking.
Okay, so for example, you're at McGill University Health Center.
Yeah.
Okay, in Montreal. At the Bell Center in Montreal, you can have a capacity sold-out crowd at a Montreal Canadiens game, for example. Should we still be doing something like that? Should we still be doing something like that?
No, no, because when the cases in the community, at least here locally, started to increase was a few weeks after the relaxation of those measures, including the activity you just mentioned. And so it'd be a little bit simplistic to think that those two were not somehow related, right? With the loosening of the relaxation of social restrictions is necessarily what leads to transmissions. And you can see that because in the age ranges where the community rates are increasing, it is exactly those that participate in those social activities that we talked about predominantly, and of course those who are not vaccinated. So this is not rocket science, right? I mean, this is pretty clear that if you're not vaccinated, you're at risk for getting infected and transmitting, and if you're participating in social activities, you're going to likely be part of the community transmission rates.
So do you think we could be headed back to the days of capacity limits, maybe indoor dining, limits like these sorts of things, Doctor? Do you think?
Well, it depends on what each region's, healthcare system surge capacity is able to tolerate, right? What we know, for example, at least here in Montreal, is that because of the last year and a half, this has bumped a lot of other, medical problems, like people getting chemotherapies and people getting surgeries and that kind of stuff. So there's only so much, that things can get bumped after a while before the surge capacity gets threatened. And so again, it depends on the region. Some regions have very low rates and good surge capacities, and some have the inverse, high rates, low surge capacities. And so it really does mean that different regions will have to look at their locale and see what needs to be done.
Okay. All right, Doctor. Thank you so much for the update today. Yeah, nice to hear from you. Yeah, I wish the news was better, to be quite honest with you, but very, very discouraging news there. Sorry, Doctor, go ahead if you want.
No, the news shouldn't be discouraging, right? Because we actually know the solution here. Okay. The playbook is right in front of us. We just have to take it out and put it into effect.
Right. 1,800 cases, you said, in Quebec today. Is that right? That's what you said?
Yeah,
around 1,800 and around 1,300 here. I mean, are we going back to these days of several thousand cases? We were, 3,000, 4,000 cases.
Well,
I mean, could we?
Those high cases in the community, there's the acute issue, which we talked about, hospitalization to death. Thank goodness there's a disconnect between that. Of course, there's also this undefined thing called long COVID, which we need to sort of get an idea, get a handle on how much of an incapacity this produces on members of our society. But, until we get more information, I'm not sure that we should just let things run rampant, right? So.
Okay. All right, Dr. Vin, thank you. Thank you. Again, Dr. Donald Vin, infectious disease specialist, medical microbiologist at McGill University Health Center, joining us today from Montreal, where it is 11:41 here in Ottawa, too. And again, just to run down those case numbers, that's a big number today. And this test positivity rate is higher than I've seen it, David.
Back over 3%. Yeah, it has been holding steady at about 2 since probably
a lot of tests,
September.
though, right? A lot of tests.
Yeah.
That's a big testing number, too. A lot of people are getting tested, which is good, right? I guess is good. 40,232 is Dr. Vin's not there anymore, right?
He's gone. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. There were things I wanted to ask him, and I totally forgot. Darn it. 1,290 province-wide today for Ontario, 36 in Ottawa, including one new Omicron case. We'll have a complete update on that during the noon news with Dr. Vera Etches giving a news briefing this morning. Renfrew, where Dr. Cushman is quoted in the Eganville Leader calling it a horror show, that they're back to where they were during the depths of the previous wave now in Renfrew. Leeds at 14 cases, Renfrew County. Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 20. Eastern Ontario Health Unit, Hawkesbury, Cornwall area, 19. Test positivity rate, 3.5% on 40,232 tests, and 10 people have died across the province of Ontario because of COVID-19. That's the latest on that. 11:43. Let's take a break. John Ivison is going to be signing books this week. The great columnist, political columnist for the National Post, has a book about Robbie Burns. And we'll tell you about that and talk some federal politics. Coming right up here on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Luce that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do, is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. The other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but of the 30-odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. It's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And yep, it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, it was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. Running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
You know him as one of the top political columnists in the country, writing for the National Post. His book is called The Riotous Passions of Robbie Burns, and he will be signing books this week at the Signatures Christmas Show at the EY Center. It's great to have back on City News here on The Rob Snow Show, John Ivison. Good morning, John.
Hi, Rob.
It's great to hear from you. Thanks for taking the time. You must be looking forward to your book signing tomorrow.
Yeah, well, the book came out last year, I think late November, and obviously we were all locked down, so there was only a limited amount of promotion that we could actually do, and obviously none in person. So this is good.
Yeah. And apparently they've been getting good crowds, and I hope the book signing goes well for you. So the book is told through the eyes of a companion of Robbie Burns, but tell us about the setting of this.
Yeah, so Burns had written his first works, which were, he was a sort of unlettered, uneducated, formally at least, ploughman who pulled together these kind of rustic works about life in Scotland for the working classes in the late 18th century, and to his amazement, it was embraced totally. I'm trying to think of what a modern equivalent would be, but it was a kind of revolutionary concept that somebody would write in their own vernacular and write about things that they knew in their own backyard. And I guess it's something along the lines of the impact that Bob Dylan made, or something along those lines. And he was taken to heart by the doyens of the Scottish Enlightenment in Edinburgh. So he went to Edinburgh. And so the novel's set just as he arrives in Edinburgh, and the whole kind of backdrop is the idea that this is a country that was very literate for the time. Everybody had to be taught how to read the Bible. So this became very accessible to his works became very accessible to a lot of people, and because of that literacy, there was this blooming of knowledge and a sort of revolution in education in Scotland, which became known as the Scottish Enlightenment, and gave birth to worldwide figures from David Hume to Adam Smith. And so Burns comes into the heart of all this, and I think it was a kind of exciting time to be in Edinburgh in the late 1780s. And it's just about his adventures there, some of which were less, let's say, academic than others. A lot of drinking, a lot of attempted womanizing. And,
womanizing.
Well, there was actually some successful womanizing, but the great love of his life that was recorded in a whole bunch of poems, famous poems such as A Fond Kiss, was this middle class woman who he desired, but kind of held him at arm's length because of a very rigid class system and a glass ceiling in 18th century Edinburgh.
And the young companion is John Bruce. Where does that come from?
He's a kind of composite of people who are around Burns at the time, and the basis for all the dialogue is Burns' actual letters, and letters back to him from some of these people, which are still in existence. And there's a voluminous volume of letters that have gone virtually unread except by Burns scholars. And I thought there's some great stuff in here, almost better than the poetry. This his turns of phrase and some of the stories he would tell. So I pulled them out as examples of his speech. Some of the exchanges that are in there are actually verbatim from some of his letters.
So you've written this book. You've written political books as well. You wrote a book about Justin Trudeau as well. You prefer books about Robbie Burns or Justin Trudeau?
Well, this was a kind of labor of love. I mean, I think every journalist feels there's a book in them. Yeah. And obviously I've had a front row seat to Trudeau and to Harper and to Paul Martin and even going back to Chrétien. So, it's almost natural to use that sort of watching history unfold in a book. I mean, but obviously it's factual and it's an extension of the day job. Whereas obviously the Burns thing is a complete departure from my normal day-to-day writing, and it was a kind of enjoyable thing to do. I'd like to do it again. I think there's You
have another one in you, John? You have another one in you?
I think so. It depends how this one goes, but I mean, we're still kind of early days because I do think that the pandemic kind of hindered its exposure a little bit. So we're trying again this year. But Burns this is ready-made for a movie. This guy was a rock star. He came to Edinburgh, blazed into Edinburgh. It was 1786 when he arrived. And I say he blazed into Edinburgh like a comet. And he's this kind of poet. He's a romantic. He's a lover, carouser. He arrives in the seat of the Scottish Enlightenment, which is, he loves it and it loves him back. He's got he provided these sort of free-thinking accounts of 18th century peasant life, and they became intensely fashionable for a brief period of time.
Yeah, it would make a good movie, actually. It would. Yes, I could see that, John. So
and Edinburgh itself as well was a fascinating place at the time. I mean, they said that at the time you could hit 50 geniuses, 50 bankers, 50 lawyers, and 50 rogues with a pistol at any given hour. And all over the place there were these drinking clubs, and there was a blooming literary scene. And at the same time, a sort of side plot of all this was a guy called Deacon William Brodie, who features in the book, but is an actual historical figure, who by day was an upstanding member of the Edinburgh City Council and a well-known cabinet and locksmith. And by night he was a thief, and he would use the keys of the locks that he'd built, and he would go and rob the great and the good of Edinburgh. They eventually caught him and hung him. And the pub on Elgin Street in Edinburgh in Ottawa is named after him. There's one on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. And this guy, he had kind of dual split personalities, was the inspiration for Robert Louis Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay, all right, okay. Talk some politics?
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. I said this morning, I think Jagmeet Singh seems to be safe in his position as leader of the New Democrats, and Blanchette seems to be safe in his position as leader of the Bloc. Certainly, as we close out the year, the internal troubles within the Conservative Party and the challenges to Aaron O'Toole's leadership are there for all to see. Maybe we don't know the full extent of it right now. Do you think Aaron O'Toole survives this thing and leads the Conservatives into the next election?
Yeah, I do.
You do? And what makes you think that, John?
Well, I think he's seen off his challenger so far. It looks like there's not going to be any ability for anybody to challenge him formally until the party's convention in the summer of 2023, by which time it would seem to be very close to an election. If you want to go through the whole process of selecting a new leader and, essentially trying to meld together all the disparate parts of the Conservative Party, I think he's done not a bad job of trying to pull together people and get them to focus on the Liberals. When he rejigged his shadow, we call it the shadow cabinet, but essentially critics, he brought in a lot of people who he had previously excluded who had supported Peter MacKay in the leadership contest. So there was a sort of healing, and he's trying to do what Harper did, and that's get everybody going in the same direction so that the caucus self-polices itself. I mean, he doesn't have to bring down the hammer every time somebody steps out of line, because the caucus, they're kind of appropriate, people within the caucus have a quiet word with whoever it is that's rocking the boat. So, by and large, I think he's weathered the worst of the storm. You never know what might come up in politics, and obviously if he loses the support of his caucus colleagues, then he's in real trouble. But at the moment, I think that he's going to get through it, and if he keeps the focus on the Liberal Party and where they're going wrong, then he's got every chance. I think what he did this week with Shannon Stubbs, who was an MP who's been critical of him, and now suddenly she's been subjected to a complaint because some staffer painted her bedroom or whatever the complaint was.
Yeah.
That's not a great move. I think that creates her as a bit of a martyr and probably get some backbiting going on in the caucus. But I think he's in not a bad position, and all he has to do at the end of the day is at some point look at like a credible alternative. He didn't really have the time to present himself to the country before this election. Most of the election was during the summer and nobody was watching. And he's got a much longer runway now to get known by the public, and all he doesn't have to be wildly exciting. He just has to be a credible alternative to the Liberals, who will have been in power for 9 years by the time of the next election.
We'll wrap it up there. All the best with the book signing tomorrow. What time are you signing books tomorrow at the EY Center?
We're on at the EY Center between 7 and 9.
7 and 9. All the best with it, John. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. From the National Post, his book, The Riotous Passions of Robbie Burns. That's John Ivison. And that's the Rob Snow Show for today. Sam LaPrade is getting ready for the Sam LaPrade Show. New news next. This is City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command.
Visit Rogers.com for more